preparation for the United Nations Association's test of English. Today, we are presenting these three topics. Historic spikes of UN membership. Compare and contrast the Group of 7, G7, and the Group of 20, G20. Explain the Group of 77, G77. The UN started in 1945, with the original 51 signatories, mostly European and Latin American countries, and has since grown to the present organization, with virtually full global membership of 193. Explain some historic spikes of UN membership growth.
There are 4 paragraphs. Number 1, historic growth. 2, East-West Europe and Asia. 3, African countries and ECOSOC. 4, Korea and Baltic states. Now, let's take a look. I'm terrible at memorizing numbers, and the most unpleasant part of this test is that small numbers are given. So many numbers, and it was a nightmare.
I can identify 3 major historic spikes with respect to new membership admissions, namely, 1955, 1960, and 1991-92.
East-West European countries and Asian countries joined in 1955.
The first spike, East-West Deal, with 16 new admissions. Since Indonesia's 60th admission in 1950, the intensive East-West confrontation prevented new UN membership. In 1955, the superpowers agreed to a deal by which some of Eastern Bloc countries such as Bulgaria and Hungary were admitted, alongside Western Bloc countries such as Italy and Spain. The admission was also granted to some newly independent Asian countries, such as Laos, Nepal, and Sri Lanka. By the end of the year, the membership jumped to 76.
In 1960, many African countries joined. This led to the later reform of ECOSOC.
The second spike, African decolonization, with 17 new admissions. The year 1960 marked the most memorable year, with many admissions of newly independent African countries. By the end of the year, the UN membership had grown to 99 from 82 in 1959. Several more African countries joined the UN in the next few years. This membership spike would later induce some membership reforms in the Security Council and the Economic and Social Council, ECOSOC.
20 more countries have joined, bringing the number of member countries to 179 in 1992. Too many numbers, right? Confusing.
The third spike, post-Cold War transition. The transitional period of the early 1990s witnessed another spike period of 20 new members, 7 in 1991 and 13 in 1992. As a result, the membership grew from 159 in 1990 to 166 in 1991, and 179 in 1992. The new members of 1991 included, among others, the remnants of the Cold War period, such as the North and South Koreas, and the 3 Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, that had become independent from the USSR. The newly admitted members in 1992 included those republics that had become independent out of the disintegrated USSR.
Various groups, with ambitions, are born one after another. What's the difference between G7 and G20? 1. The first oil shock and the Asian financial crisis. 2. 7 or 8? 3. 7 plus 13. 4. Donor country mentality. 5. Should evolve as it gets bigger. 6. Different approaches to Russia.
There was an economic crisis behind the birth of the G7 and G20.
They are coalition groups of governments to promote mutual understanding and cooperation in dealing with pertinent global issues. They are not equipped with any permanent supranational secretariat or staff. The G7 originated as a 4-country meeting in the wake of the first oil shock in 1973, whereas the G20 was born as an offshoot of the G7 at the outbreak of the Asian financial crisis in 1997.
It is confusing to have such a membership suspension. Don't confuse me anymore, please.
The G7s began as an informal forum, known as the Library Group, named after their first meetings venue, the White House's library, among the financial ministers of France, West Germany, the US and the UK. Later the same year, Japan was invited to join them, and form the G5. In 1975, France invited representatives from the G5 and Italian governments to the first summit meeting. In 1976, its membership was further extended with Canada as the seventh member. In 1998, Russia became the eighth member, forming the G8, and this name remained unchanged until 2014 when its membership was suspended.
Some people like to belong to a big organization, and others don't, and I'm more of the latter.
The G7's initiative in 1997 led to the formation of the G20, an enlarged group of finance ministers and central banks. It comprises the 19 countries, G7 plus 13 new members, Argentina, Australia, Brazil, China, India, Indonesia, South Korea, Mexico, Russia, Saudi Arabia, South Africa, and Turkey, together with the European Union, EU. Apparently, the geographical representation is skewed. Africa and the Middle East are poorly represented. The G20's discussions have evolved in concert with the main global concerns of its members. Against the early focus on the sustainability of sovereign debt and global financial stability, they have later come to cover global economic performance broadly. After its inaugural Leaders Summit in 2008, the leaders announced that the G20 would replace the G8 as the main economic grouping.
In my opinion, the more members an international organization has, the more complicated the path to accomplishing its mission.
It is difficult to determine which between the G7 and the G20 depict a more political disposition. Being a group of the largest developed countries, the G7 could be regarded as a group of relative coherence, with similar donor country mentality, perhaps cultivated in the OECD, DAC forums.
They might have asked themselves, what was a group for?
As noted above, the G20's discussions have become diversified over time. However, the scope of their main concerns are still relatively restricted, within financial matters. Indeed, G20 participants may touch upon issues beyond these matters. They may not feel comfortable, given the diversity of memberships, and thus that of their views, may create difficult situations to find agreements.
Organizations need a solid portfolio of members to accomplish its mission.
Having a forum where countries of diverse backgrounds could confer was part of the impetus for creating the G20. In 2014, the G7 and G20 took different approaches to Russia's membership after the country had made a military incursion to Ukraine and eventually annexed the Ukrainian territory of Crimea. The G7, then the G8, which Russia had formally joined in 1998, suspended the country's membership. The G20 has kept the Russian membership.
1. To promote South-South cooperation. 2. 130 countries in G77. 3. Come and go. 4. The working modalities. 5. A clumsy white elephant. Having the ability to negotiate collectively with other groups in a multilateral forum is one of the essential factors in the international community.
The G77 is the largest intergovernmental coalition in the world, whose membership is open to all developing countries. The group is designed to support the members' interests by promoting South-South cooperation and to enhance their collective negotiating capacities vis-à-vis other groups in multilateral forums.
The initial member states of 77 countries have now nearly doubled.
The G77 began its initial formation process in the run-up to the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, UNCTAD, held in Geneva in 1964. The group was formalized in June 1964 by 77 members with the joint declaration of 77 countries. The group's members have grown to more than 130, all from the Global South, but the original name has been retained. Beginning with the first ministerial meeting in Algeria, in 1967, which adopted the Charter of Algiers, a permanent institutional structure has gradually developed.
The organization is gradually losing its vitality.
China has provided consistent support to the group. However, this large emerging economy prefers the group to be identified as the G77 and China. Over time, some countries have left the group and joined an alternative one, such as the European Union, EU, Cyprus and Malta, and the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, South Korea and Mexico. Other countries simply stopped their group affiliation. International giant organizations tend to become more and more similar. The working modalities of the G77 have become similar among its different geographical chapters: New York, UN, Geneva, UNCTAD, Nairobi, UNEP, Paris, UNICEF, Roma, FAO, Vienna, UNIDO, etc. Such as a similar membership, decision-making and certain operating methods. The annual meeting of the Ministers for Foreign Affairs is convened at the beginning of the regular session of the General Assembly in New York. So far, the South Summit, the supreme decision-making body of the group, has been held twice, in Havana, Cuba in 2000, and in Doha, Qatar in 2005.
There is a saying that if you want to go early, you can go alone, and if you want to go far, you can go together, but this time, it seems that you couldn't go anywhere together.
Many observers have criticized the merits of the G77, claiming that the group has outlived its effectiveness in promoting international structural reform. The general understanding is that the G77 group had its peak period in the 1970s and has since lost its diplomatic bargaining clout. Some observers view that the small membership framework of the G20, including many key members of the Global North and Global South, would provide a more effective diplomatic forum.
I hope the UN system does not end up in the same way.
Indeed, it has become a very formidable task to package increasingly diverging interests of the Global South constituents. In fact, many alternative channels have come to convey the interests of like-minded country groups, such as those of least developed countries, LDCs, landlocked developing countries, LLDCs, and small island developing states, SIDS. Furthermore, three major regional groups of developing countries, Asia, Africa, and Latin America and Caribbean, have actively involved in their own region-specific multilateral diplomacy. It is then wondered whether the G77 has turned out to be a clumsy white elephant.
This time, all the narration was in English. I got a request for English subtitles from Dr.Cape's best friend Bob, but I didn't know how to do it. Sorry. So I made it all in English. Did you enjoy it? Thank you for watching. I see you soon.